wires and machines all hooked up to her, keeping her vital energy alive while she was gone. She was unconscious in a comic state for 2 days. And in the end, they were a fabulous team working to try and save her life. But the injury was too much and she passed. And that was, I think, one of the hardest moments of our lives when we lost her. And she was finally gone.
Hello, everybody. I'm just so honored to be here today. I'm with David Halliwell, who is engaged to a person that I call my big sis. She's a fellow author, and we met each other last year, and we found out we had the same birthdays, and we've just really been kind of joined at the hip. And she and David became engaged in the little bit latter part of their lives. So that's pretty exciting. We can talk a little bit about that. And the reason why David's here today is David is a grieving dad. I always say grieving does not go away because love never leaves, and grief is love. We wouldn't grieve had we not loved so dearly. So David has graciously said yes, that we could have a little interview so that we can share his story. And it's twofold. Number one, I know that for many grieving parents, sharing your story is so important to continually be in that healing process and that grief process, but also to help others, because there's so many. I was just on a call, and you're in British Columbia, Canada, but in the US alone, the statistics a few years ago is that there are tens of thousands of children who die every year in the US. So when we look worldwide, it's huge. So we know that there's a lot of grieving families out there. So we hope that our conversation today will help speak to your heart in some way and maybe help with a little healing. So David, welcome.
Hi, Pat. Thank you.
So why don't we start with, and David let's just talk a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about, you're a musician and artist. Let's start there. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay, yeah, I am in fact a fine artist all my life and designer. And the music has always been a part of my soul. And now we can talk about that later, but now it's more important than the art these days. I found it very strange being a dad, because I was always a kind of solo gypsy troubadour act and hadn't even visualized having a family. Not that I was against it, but I just couldn't see it in my role as a solo gypsy person. And then my beautiful daughter came along and changed everything forever. So it definitely it brought things out in me and helped me grow in so many ways that I'm so grateful for now, of course.
So let's talk about your daughter.
Yes.
Catherine.
Catherine with a C. Now, let's start right there. When she was born, I said to her mum, anyone who goes through labor and gives birth to a child deserves to name their child. So I had no ownership on the name. So she named her Catherine Honor Halliwell, which I thought was a fabulous name. And I said, well, there are reasons I already knew that this kid was special and unique. So I said, well, if I can just have a little bit of input, I'm going to take the E out of Catherine and make it Catherine with a C instead of a K. So her name was Catherine, not Catherine. And then when she was quite the character always from the get-go. When she was about, I think 3 years old, we were at Auntie Kathy's with a K, And Auntie Kathy said, "Kath, would you like some orange juice?" And she put her little hand on her little hip. And she said, "I'm not a cat. I'm not a Kathy, and I'm not a Katie. I'm a cat."
Oh,
So we all went, "Well, that's it. She's a cat." And she was Cat Halliwell to everyone after that.
oh,
So,
that's so beautiful. I just
yeah.
love how children will actually step into it's like, I think when they're born, their name has already been chosen, right? Before they were even born, and then they just step into that beautiful presence of their name. So she's Cat.
That
I
would
love
make
it.
sense, I think, now to me. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
She was a
Oh,
cat.
yeah. So, okay, so you're married, you had this beautiful little girl. Tell us a little bit more about Kat and what was, who she was, and her spirit and all of that. Just like, what kind of young woman was she? Just share a
Yeah,
little bit.
yes. She when she was born, the moment of birth. Now, Marion, her mum, had a cesarean section after about 36 hours of trying to give birth naturally. And eventually we all agreed that this should be done. So she had a cesarean, and I was in the operating theatre, of course, by her side the whole time. So the nurse passed the swaddled baby to me first, because Marion had had an injection, so she was laying there, still conscious. And I picked up Cat, and she had shining violet eyes.
Gosh.
Yes, they were like little violet lamps. It was absolutely stunning. So, and I got to take her over to Mum, and Mum met her baby, and that was the beginning for us.
You fell in love.
Oh, absolutely. She was
Fell
so
in
gorgeous.
love, daddy, daughter. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And she was a bright spirit right from the get-go. I mean, she was so ready. The funny thing is, she ended up being a professional soccer player,
Oh,
an athlete generally, but soccer became her passion. And it's like right from the get-go, she was saying, "Throw me a ball, throw me a ball. Let's get into this game," you know. She was such a bright spirit.
mm. Oh, so beautiful. I could just, and I know you've shared pictures. I just got to see a picture of her up on the wall, and she's just vibrant, gorgeous,
Yes, a stunning
lovely.
beauty. Stunning
Yeah,
beauty.
just absolutely. So um, now let's fast forward to 10 years ago.
Okay.
What happened 10 years ago?
Um, what happened 10 years ago? I think it's I think it's every parent's nightmare to get a call in the middle of the night to tell them that your child is in a hospital and it's looking very serious. It was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when the phone rang, and I had to get up bleary-eyed and get this message. And from there, it was a insane dash to get from Vancouver over to Seattle, to the Harborview Hospital. I tried to get the ferry to the mainland because I was over here on Vancouver Island. But the ferry had just left as I pulled into the parking lot. It was just one struggle after another. And I had to drive down to Seattle and get to the hospital. And it was hell. She had been in a car accident coming home from a concert in Washington late at night, and they hit black ice on the highway at 2 in the morning or something like that, coming home to Vancouver. And the car flipped. And her girlfriend and the guy who was driving, her girlfriend's boyfriend, were all thrown from the car. They survived with scratches and bruises, but the car fell on Cat, and they had to helicopter her to Harborview. So now I just want to mention her mum, God bless her, We divorced. I think it was about 8 or 9 years before this happened. And we had all settled into our singular lives and we were all connected and everything was fine. So she made her way down there and I made my way down there because we left instantly. And there we were. She was with her new partner. And we were there for 2 days and 2 nights, just praying, you know. And she was lying on this operating table with wires and machines all hooked up to her, keeping her vital energy alive while she was gone. She was unconscious in a comic state for 2 days. And in the end, they were a fabulous team working to try and save her life. But the injury was too much and she passed. And that was, I think, one of the hardest moments of our lives when we lost her. And she was finally gone. And then we had an extra challenge because we had never discussed the concept of organ donorship with her or each other. It had never been on our minds, you know. We'd never seen this coming. But we had to look at that seriously. And it was very strange how miracles happen. We were getting messages. Marion had her iPad phone thing. I'm digitally dyslexic, so she was doing all the Facebook posts, the emails, the Twitter calls that were coming in from around the world because the story had gone out. And Cat made friends all over the world. She traveled. Well, one of the messages that came in was from my cousin's friend who Cat was with in London. And he told us this story that they had discussed the concept of organ donorship at lunch one day. And he said to, he's a Londoner, right? Regular guy. And he said to Cat, oh, screw that. And Cat looked at him square in the face like she did when she really wanted to get a point across. And she said, what do you mean, man? It's a effing no-brainer. Somebody dies and nothing happens, or somebody dies and lives get saved. It's a no-brainer. So we got that message from our daughter at that time. And that's when we looked at each other and said, right, this is the right thing to do. Here we have this girl who's a perfect body, perfect system, perfect mind. She never drank or did drugs. She was an athlete. And her body was going to gift other people with life. And she saved 5 lives and gave 2 people sight with her beautiful blue eyes.
Oh, I have chills. Like washed with such beautiful energy, truly beautiful energy, and how that message could come through at such a devastating time where you can't even think straight, you know, that it's your beautiful daughter. What do you do? And what a gift from heaven to have that message granted, and that she lives on.
Right at that time, that message came to us and helped us with that, you know. It was amazing. The little miracles that happen that you don't really get until after the fact, you know, when things settle down. Then if I can just mention as well, because this was a big, big moment, obviously. And I said to the medical team that we had 2 counselors with us for that 2 days. One was a Catholic priest, because my religion was based in Catholicism. So there was a Catholic priest available. So he was working with us. And this wonderful young woman who was a lay person, counselor, who helped Marion considerably as well. So anyway, cut to the chase. I said, before I sign these papers for this, that as her dad, I would want to be with her when this operation happened, you know, just because I'm her dad. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't go in that room and watch this operation on my beautiful girl, you know. So I said, if you will allow this Catholic priest to go in with the other counselor and say prayers for her before this happens, for her soul, I said, I will sign these papers. And they agreed. So I did. And he went in with the other counselor and said the last rites for her body. And there were 6 medical teams in the room ready to do these separate operations, because you've got to get the organs quickly to where they're going to do their work. So they were all in the room, and they said that there was a silent reverence around Cat, this beautiful, beautiful girl, while he said these prayers. And we found out later that this was the first time in American medical history that a religious ceremony has ever been allowed inside the operating room. And that was for Cat. So she was special, and she got the special treatment.
Of course.
I know my mum, who was the Catholic one in the family, was very, very happy in heaven about that.
Oh, what an absolute blessing, and to be able to have ceremony and starting right at that beginning, because that is so important, we know, in the healing process. So David, it's been 10 years. Are you willing to share a little bit about some of the high points, some of the low points, because we know that grief is a roller coaster of emotions and affecting our lives. A little bit about what helped you over these last 10 years. How did you survive? You know, I mean, that's the real question of how did you survive, and what are the things that worked for you, and what are some of the things that maybe weren't so helpful during this 10-year period?
Right. I think I have to confess in the beginning, now in the very beginning, I was being the guy. I was so busy taking care of her mum, her friends, other family members. I was like the go-to guy to try and help them get over this obstacle, you know, and didn't even think about myself really, because that was my role at the time. But then after everything was over, I had to drive to Seattle to pick up the remainder of her ashes in an urn after the operation. And I brought that urn back to her mum at the family home on Salt Spring, where she grew up. I thought that was the place. Later, we shared these ashes, but we'll talk about that later. After that was all done, and we had a fantastic memorial and life celebration on Salt Spring Island. I think there were 450 people came, and that was only the ones that could make it. There were people sending messages from around the world because she touched so many hearts. But when that was all over, I came back home to Victoria. And that's when I fell apart, because I had no one else there to save or help or be focused on. And I confess I got into drinking and smoking marijuana and just died in my room. Absolutely died in my room. And that went on for nearly a year. I mean, I went to work and came home because I had to, but I couldn't connect with anybody. I couldn't find a reason to get up and go. I was in a terrible state. And I think there's several things that saved me. the first and foremost is that I do have a faith in God that I grew up with in my family and in my own personal experience. I've lived a spiritual life in my own way. And I think it was that knowing the presence of God and that there was hope after disaster, because I had seen it before in my life and other lives, that I started to get a sense of, slap my face in the mirror. Come on, Dave. What the hell are you doing here? You can't give up on life, And that's when Cat came to me in a dream with a very specific message. I had moved to Duncan. A friend in our circle of friends said, we have this family cabin in the countryside outside Duncan. Nobody's staying there right now. Maybe it will be a place, Dave, that you can find some peace, get out of the city, So I did. I moved into this cabin and was trying to pick myself up. I wasn't doing a great job, but I was trying. And then I noticed that I was starting to get very sick in my intestines. Terrible pain and problems, and going to the washroom became difficult. And I started to think, oh my God, do I have a cancer or something going on here? Is my grief manifesting in a physical way? Because I know it can do, right? So I got very scared. Now, I hate hospitals and I hate doctors. Anyone will tell you that knows me. And I, eat healthy food and keep a healthy mentality and drink lots of fresh water, right? So I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker and wondering, what the hell? I'm going to have to go to the hospital tomorrow morning to go to the emergency because something serious is going on here, right? Well, that's the night that Cat came to me in a dream. And I woke in my dream, I was still asleep. I woke up in my dream and the water was running in the tap at the sink. I didn't leave that on. What's going on? So I get up and walk over to the sink and the water's, just pouring into this sink. And I think, and it smells funny. The water's smelling funny. And then the sink blocked and this sludgy water was filling up the sink and threatening to flood the sink. And I'm trying to turn the tap off and it won't turn off. Now I'm dreaming, of course, but this is all going on. And at that moment, I realized somebody's standing next to me. And I look, and right here, just like that photograph that you just saw, is my gorgeous daughter, shining, looking me right in the eyes. And she pointed at the sink tap and she said, everything's going to be all right, Dad. You just need to take the pressure back a touch. I went, oh, interesting. So I reached out and just touched the tap and it didn't empty the sink. It was clear, white, bright, shining, smelling, fresh sink. And I looked at her and smiled and she looked me in the eyes again and said, everything's going to be all right, Dad. Right? And I wake up in bed going, what the hell was that? Where's Cat? I got up and ran outside looking for her because it was so real, okay? Well, then I thought about what was she telling me about the tap? What was going on with the dirty, sludgy? What's going on with that, right? So I phoned the landlady who knew the whole story about Cat. That's why she offered me the cabin. And she said, well, that's strange because we've never had a problem with that artesian well for 25 years. It's pure, pure water. But I'll get the guy in to check the water, okay? And when she did, they discovered that some organic poison had got into the well. And I was drinking poisoned water, thinking I'm getting fresh water to clean my system, right? And it was getting worse and worse and worse. So at that point, I went, right. And I went and bought some glacial water. The landlady, God bless her, got the whole well cleaned out and sorted out. But I stopped drinking that water, and within 3 days, there was no pain, and I've been healthy ever since.
Oh,
My
she saved
daughter
your life.
came to me and saved my life.
She saved your life.
Saved my life.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the first turning point for me. I mean, I just knew, I mean, the very fact that her spirit was still alive, communicating with me and giving me messages like this, so pertinent and so relevant in the moment, that gave me hope that her spirit was alive out there. And I turned a corner at that point, right? And that's when I stopped drinking. And I haven't drunk ever since. I've never been a drinker, but I stopped drinking. That was it. And started to get back into work. Now, I wasn't happy and glorious, but I had now a reason to believe in life again, that she was still out there somewhere, you know.
You had hope.
Yes. And you know, the other thing that happened?
The greatest thing is love, right?
Oh, love is the thing. Oh, it's all about love. We are all about love. And I just want to mention one thing, Pat, if I may, as this, my turning around. Shortly after that happened, I said to myself, well, come on, Dave, just get up and go down to the coffee shop, be with people. You don't have to connect with anyone, but let's start being with people again. Get out of this room. I've been dying in this room, you know. So I did that, and I walked down to the coffee shop. And as I'm walking into the coffee shop, they wheeled this young man out who was in a wheelchair. And he was one of these, forgive me, cerebral palsy, I think it is, like this. Right? And as I passed him, he looked at me and he said, "Isn't it a fantastic day?" And I just cried. I just cried and I hugged him. And I said, "Thank you so much for that," you know? And after he had left, I stood there and I looked at myself. Perfect health, perfect physical specimen, perfect mind, friends to die for, family to die for, talent, opportunity. I had so much to live for. And this young man in that wheelchair was happier than me and more into life than I was at that moment. That turned me around. That got me back to myself. And I started coming up again. So.
Oh, wow. There's just so much in what you just shared, because going into that depths of despair is so common, you know, because you just, you know, the drinking and the smoking pot and whatever, I mean, that's not, you know, when I'm working with people, it's like, don't shame yourself for that. That's just a way of self-medicating a trauma that's so crushing that it's just a way to survive during that period. But then you had this beautiful time with Cat, and realizing that there is no true death. It's a transition, but that she's here with you always, right? I mean, you know, and caring and loving you so deeply and opening up your faith. And then you come across this gentleman in the wheelchair who to me is like an angel. It's like an angel sitting in that wheelchair just wanting to give you hope.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. It was a blessing. It was a big blessing. At that moment, I needed a blessing like that. I needed my eyes to be opened again, you know? Yeah. So. Oh,
that's so beautiful. So you've been doing your art and music and all of that. And it's been 10 years now.
Yes.
And
it was actually getting into the music that saved me and gave me a purpose again. And I did that because of something Cat said to me when she was here. She got to hear me play at the open stage on Salt Spring Island for the first time, because I had never really done it you know, we were busy lives, and I did it in the kitchen at night, you know. And she heard me play, and she came up to me, you know, a teenage girl, you know, you think she's going to be embarrassed. Oh God, Dad's on stage, you know. And then after I performed, she came up and she said, Dad, that was incredible. Dad, you wrote those songs. You should be doing your music, Dad. Never mind the art and all that other stuff. You should be doing your music, Dad. And I never forgot that. And that came back to me. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to take that from my girl, because there's some kind of reason in that, other than me just wanting to spend some time with the guitar, you know. And as it happens, it's the music and the writing songs that have opened me up again and got me back into life again in so many ways. So Pat, please forgive me. I'm going to grab a tissue. I need a
That's
tissue.
okay. That's
Okay.
okay.
I should have known there'd be some tears here.
Well, that's the beauty of this. And for people who are listening to this, I liken tears to grief is such a rocky, very hard, and I liken it to like a mountainside where, you know, there's ragged edges, right? And it's dangerous, and you know, the fear of falling deep into the crevice of the mountains is just so devastating. But the tears, to me, just remind me of a waterfall, just constantly like going over those rocks and smoothing the rough edges, allowing the rough edges to become smoother, shinier, and creating a new type of beauty. So out of the raggedness becomes this beautiful softening. And tears are so important. You know, I know for my mother, who's a grieving mother, she never cried. And all of that stayed inside of her for so long. And it took her until 60 years after the death of my brother, when I was finally able to communicate with her in a way that allowed her to open up those feelings. And she still hasn't cried, but she'll say to me, I'm crying inside. And it's
Right.
like, okay, that's okay. It's okay, whatever works for you. But that's the beauty of, I go back to, if we had never loved, we would never grieve. And so this grief is so important, because it's a testimony of our love. And David, there's just so much. I mean, you definitely have a story through your songs, and I know through your beautiful paintings, and you found a medium, several different types of artistic medium to help you in your healing process.
Yes.
And your faith, and just getting this hope and this light in your life. And that's really what I want those people who are listening to us is, you may be in the depths where David was, you know, and just feeling like there is no way I can get out of this. I've had more parents tell me versus not, that they just wish they had died. They wish they could be dead. They wish that they can't imagine living without their child. That's common, and it's not, I don't think it's suicidal ideation. I think that's just the reality is, you know, trying to figure out how you're going to live in this world without a person who is so, you love so deeply, and you have so much love in your heart.
Yes.
So you may be, for those of you who are listening, in that deep, dark place. But David is one, he's been there. He's been so open and authentic and vulnerable, sharing his story with us to give you hope, so that you can see, you know, this, you have hope. There is hope, you know, and it's hanging on to that thread of faith. Whatever faith is for you, it's hanging on to that thread to help you, so that you're not falling over the you know, the mountainside, that you're hanging on to that thread, and having people that care for you, like these friends who offered you a place to stay, to help heal some of that deep brokenness, and then other people showing up in your life, and then, the opening up yourself to hearing Cat and feeling Cat. I think, when people are first grieving, it's very difficult for them to feel their loved one, and because you're kind of in that insulated, I think, that initial part of grief, it's trauma, and our mind just goes into lockdown, right? And insulates you, because it needs to kind of hold you together. And then as you start doing some healing and a little bit of repairing, then all of a sudden, if you can have that connection with your loved one, like you have with Cat, that to me is when healing really starts. With all the people that I've worked with, once that they can realize death is not death. I don't know how to explain that, but it's not like that's the end of the road and there's nothing
No,
more.
that
There's
is the end.
so
Yeah.
much more there.
Yeah. And for the benefit of anyone who might be hearing, I'm not going to tell a story of I'm some big tough guy here, because I considered suicide when I was drinking in my room after the event. I considered suicide, and I am not a person to consider that. I'm a very upbeat, walking in faith, loving life person. But that deep, wide, aching chasm of grief was so terrible. I didn't know what to do with myself. And I considered driving off the mountain. It's funny you mentioned the mountain. I'm just going to drive my car off the cliff. And I don't want to do this. This is too painful to do. Obviously, Kat's message to me saved me from doing that. And I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning in case she hears this, but her mum actually tried to commit suicide. She took a bottle of pills. This was our only child. And she was, of course, devastated. She took a bottle of pills. They rushed her to the hospital and pumped her stomach out and saved her life. And she was pissed off that they'd saved her life, because she was in such a horrible place with the pain. So there is no easy way through this, but there is a way through this. And Kat's messages helped us. And can I share another story?
Absolutely.
Now, this was on the anniversary of Kat's death that we always spoke to each other. Remember, we're divorced and separated, but it brought us together as friends because of Kat and her legacy. So I get this phone call from her mum at 3:00 in the morning. And she said, "You're not going to believe this." Now, I'll just fill you in. Marion had become depressed and suicidal. She'd given up on life. She was doing daily, what the hell, All her friends were saying, we've given up trying to reach her. She's angry, depressed. It's insane. There's no reaching her anymore. Well, Cat came to her in a dream, and this is what she said. "Mum, love is the food and the fuel of the afterlife, from us and to us." And Marion wrote this message down in the middle of the night, and she phoned me, and she said, that was Cat. It was her. There was no doubt about it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, after she'd had time to actually digest those words and the connotations of those words, it saved her completely. And she said now she gets up every morning and sends love to Cat in the afterlife, that she knows her spirit is alive and still loving us and caring about us. So she saved her mum's life too with that message. And that message has touched a lot of people too. So love is the food and the fuel of the afterlife, from us and to us. There is a place called the afterlife that our spirits go to. This is what I get from this.
Mm-hmm.
She is still there, alive and loving us. And we can send her love too from here.
That's beautiful. I wrote it down. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
I,
Please
I,
share it with anyone.
I would love to share that because that what we said, faith, hope, and love is the greatest of these.
Yes.
There's a reason some of these sayings and biblical sayings and all of that have hung around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, is because they're so true, and love really is what, Cat's love for you, and to have saved both of our parents' lives. And I would imagine that she knew so many people. There's probably more that she saved that you probably have never even heard of, that she's probably doing her magic throughout the world with lots of friends.
In actual fact, Pat, there are other stories of her touching other people, her favorite people. She came to them too.
Yeah. And so that's really, I am so appreciative of you sharing this. Now, I hope you don't mind, but I know from your dear fiance, the 10-year anniversary was a little bit more difficult. True?
Yes, it was. I don't know why, but it all came back like a ton of bricks on me. And I cannot explain why, because I've been actually working my way out of grief and back into life. And then I meet this beautiful woman, and there's a whole new hope in my life, but something happened. And as it happens, I was called to write a letter to Cat as a therapeutic tool to help me with all this. And I wrote that letter. I went and meditated at my studio and actually stayed there for a couple of days to get myself around this. And I wrote a 21-page letter to Cat. And in that letter, I purged my heart and purged my feelings. And it really, really helped something. I can't explain why. Junie could probably explain it better than me, because she works in this kind of therapy and it's her life calling. But it changed something, Pat. It changed something. And I felt like a bus had been lifted off my back. And it was that letter was art therapy, if you like. Now, I just want to mention, I have worked with art therapy, helping people with social problems, abuse victims, recovering drug addicts, alcoholics, using art and music as therapy. And I had never applied this to myself, ever, because I was always using it to help others, right? But this was my time to do that therapy with myself. And writing that letter, I don't know what happened, but I feel like a completely new start has happened. So I would recommend that to anyone who's dealing with this. So.
Yep. And I, as you mentioned that, now I just sent you my book.
Thank you so much.
But that's part of what I actually have, just for people who, this is my book, is How Do I Survive 7 Steps to Living After Child Loss. And that's part of one of the exercises that I have my clients do, and that I have in the book is write a letter to your child, not about your child,
Yes.
but to your child, but truly having that communication, because again, it's having that spiritual connection. I am such a strong believer in energy, and knowing that energy transforms it at a constant rate. Constantly, our energy is always transforming. And so with death, it's a transformation. It's moving into another energetic form. And once we are able to, some people say, connect beyond the veil, or raise our consciousness, or get to a higher dimension, we can then meet up with that. And I know for myself, I've had that experience so many times, but you are the walking, talking truth of this is what can occur once you're able to open up your mind and your heart to connecting and with your child, with your loved ones, so that it's not that you're alone. You miss that physical, and that will always be that grief that you're dealing with. Grief doesn't go away. You have healing periods in the 10 years. I appreciate that you are talking about that. I have a girlfriend where it was 10 years last year, and her 10th year was the most difficult year for her, because it's 10 years seems like a long time. And part of it is the fear of forgetting, or maybe moving away from it. And I just knew that 10th year, I just intuitively knew it was going to be very difficult for her. And so I made sure that I was there even more for her during this time, and we were able to really talk about her son. And so I think, those are some of those firsts. The 10-year anniversary, that's a first. You're always going to have these things. So
the hard one of all, Pat, was birthdays and Christmas. When her birthday comes around and Christmas comes around, we fall apart again. Every year that happened for 10 years.
What do you do?
Things have just shifted, but
yeah. So what kind of things, I'm just going to ask you this, have you created any kind of a special way of dealing with, her birthday, celebrating her, or, whatever kind of, even your own personal ceremony, whatever that is during these times? Because I know that we want to always keep our loved one alive and their memories alive. So what do you do when it is her birthday or it's Christmas?
Okay. Yes, that is relevant actually, because every year that comes around, there is a place here on Dallas Road called Fonio Beach. Now, Catherine was in Victoria at one point in the Victoria ladies soccer team, and she lived here for a while. So Fonio Beach was a place we remember her. So we spread some of her ashes, a little vial of her ashes, on Fonio Beach as a pilgrimage spot to go and be there with her, And every year I take a red rose down to Fonio Beach and plant it in the sand for the ocean to come and take it away. And I sit and talk with her and pray, and, and feel her presence in that way. And that's a ritual now for me on her birthday.
That's beautiful. And I really highly recommend that for any of you who are grieving out there, is find whatever it is for you that feels right for you. Some people may have a birthday cake and actually do a birthday celebration with their families. Others may have these private ceremonies like you do, just connecting and reflecting and knowing. And if your friends of, your friend has experienced this deep loss, just be cognizant of that and just be there for them in whatever way that they want to be. So if they want to be silent and do it in a silent, then just hold the space for them to do that and surround them in love. If they want to do, my friend that I was talking about, she does a big motorcycle rally and raises money for the military veterans. And so she does that every year, and now it's the 11th year she's doing it. So she does that. So as a friend, I'm going to be there and help volunteer in that. So if you are friend or family members of grieving parents, gosh, just be there for them. You talked about your Cat's mom, and some of her friends started falling away. Because they had tried so hard. And if you are a friend or a family member of someone where it feels like you just can't get through, then pray. Hold them in love, because that is an energy that can help them, and be there for them when they're ready to, come out of that shell and reemerge into life. Be there for them without judgment, but with unconditional love.
And everybody grieves. I know you already know this, Pat. Everybody grieves differently too. And you've got to just let them be who they are and what they're doing in their grief,
Yep. And I know you've mentioned to me too, I think it was, were you connected with Compassionate Friends? Was
Yes.
that a good group for you?
I actually, yeah, this happened just after Marion got her message from her daughter, that I had heard about the Compassionate Friends group and said, well, I'm going to go down and check them out and see what's going on there. So I did. And in actual fact, it was another opportunity for Catherine to send a message. And if you want, I'll share that story. Yeah. Okay, the first evening, now Compassionate Friends are all people who have lost children. If you haven't lost a child, you don't understand what this grief is all about. Losing a loved one, losing a sibling, losing your parent, it's all grief. There's no big grief or small grief. But losing a child somehow has this special depth to it. And so they all gather to support each other. So the routine is, and this is my first evening there, we sit in a circle of chairs in the room. There was about 15 or 16 people there. And everyone has an opportunity to speak and share their feelings. And it doesn't matter if you want to swear at God or tell stories of your loved one or relive the nightmare of the death. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is, everyone just holds that space until it's their turn to speak. Well, we went around the circle a little bit, and the first thing I discovered was that I thought I had the worst story in the room. And I found out that no, I didn't have the worst story in the room. There were other stories I won't even go into that were far worse. So that in itself was a help to me with my grief. But I told the story of love is the food and the fuel of the afterlife, that message she sent to her mum. And it touched everybody in the room. Now, quickly, the first evening, there was a young woman sitting by herself over by the door on a chair, crying, but wasn't part of the circle. And the lady next to me said, she just lost her only son a month ago. 1 month ago. And she said she can't speak or do anything, but she'd heard about us. She just wants to be in the room with us. So we held that space for her. Okay, cut to the chase. A month later, the next meeting happened. So I went to the second meeting, and we're sitting in the circle, and that young woman wasn't there. But she walked into the room halfway through the meeting and interrupted the meeting and apologized for interrupting. But she said, I just had to come tonight to talk to you, David. And I went, what? I didn't know this woman. You know, what did I do? You know what I mean? What's going on? She said, your daughter, Cat, came to me and spoke to me in a dream. And she said, tell my dad, I know my dad's having a hard time. Tell my dad I'm okay. But she said, I really came for you because I'm here in the afterlife with your son, David, incidentally, and I'm taking care of him in the afterlife. And your son has got a message for you. And the message is, you must not give up on life. And that's when she broke down and she said, I was contemplating suicide. The pain was too much for her and she was going to end it. And Cat stopped her from committing suicide. And as far as I know, because I haven't been in touch since, as far as I know, she made it through because of Catherine's message, which touched everybody in the room again. So
Oh
you
man,
not give up on life.
And this girl of yours, her purpose is so much even bigger in the afterlife. I mean,
Yes.
she really is this beacon of light and hope. And oh my gosh, you know, and the strength that she has to just really like come forward and say, hey, you know, we're gonna help you in this process, because you need to know up here we're all doing well.
We're all fine up here. Yeah.
So much. We're dancing and having a great time, you know, and we love you. And it's like Cat is not going to let anybody ever forget that they are loved.
Right.
Ever. Oh, that is just like so powerful.
It's incredible. And Cat she was such a darling heart, always. She took care of everybody. She loved her friends, loved her cats, loved the dragonflies. She was such a beacon of love and caring. And her mum and I had joked, actually had our first laugh, that she now is working in the afterlife, taking care of everybody up there, because that was her nature down here, you know.
What a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful soul. I mean, I feel like I know her. I just can feel her energy and her deep love, and that she, your message here today is just like so incredible. And I know that it's going to get out to so many people, David. And I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful that you allowed me to sit in this space and the honor of listening to your story.
Thank you.
You are in my heart. Cat is in my heart. All of you are so deeply, because this is why we're here. We're here to share that there's more to life than this. It's so much bigger, and love is the overriding. This is, if we love and we hold love and we share our love, this is how we all heal. This is where the healing comes from. So, wow, we've spent an hour here. Can you believe it?
Oh, I can't believe it.
Isn't that awesome? Isn't that awesome? Because I just have to share, David was a little bit nervous, like, oh my gosh, you know, I can get up on stage and sing and do my music, and this is like a little unnerving for me, but this is the beauty of sharing, and being able to hold space for one another, is that time just flows. And that's the other thing, is I was telling my friend where it had been 10 years since Ben had died. And I said, you know, 10 years on this earthly realm seems like a long period of time. But I think that in that other dimension and the after, it's just a split second. It's like they haven't been gone. And so it's a split second. So, you know, there's just, something seems so long and taking such time, but just knowing that really there's never an ending, and this is a never ending love. You know, your children are always with you and love you as deeply and desperately as you love them. And that, you know, hang on to that, and know that there are so many people like compassionate friends. There are the Davids of the world that I know he would sit down and talk to anybody who's a grieving parent and a grieving dad, and hold space, because people did it for him. There's people like his beautiful love and fiance Junie. They got engaged at like the age of 70, which is so uber cool.
Awesome?
It's so awesome. I'm just I can't even express how absolutely thrilled I am for the both of you to be able to enjoy this love. You know, I'm 62, so I'm a little bit younger than them, but still to be able to have this, you know, they're just so in love. It's just like beyond belief. But Junie, you know, there's people like his fiance Junie. She's a psychotherapist. She's a writing coach, and she helps people express themselves and express the stories like what David, you know, just shared, and express them in writing books and you know, different things like that. So I'm going to make sure that I have contact information, and also for David's work. You know, I mean, he sells paintings, he does some of that. So I want to have all of that in here. So I'll make sure that all of that is there. How you can be in contact with his fiance Junie if you're interested in writing your story or figuring out how to write your story. Yeah. I mentioned that I have this book How do I survive 7 steps for living after child loss? Again, I am not, and I'm just going to explain that real quick. I am not the person who experienced the death of a child. I was a child born into a grieving family. So it's a little bit different perspective, but when we talk about spiritual connection, I believe that my brother was reborn. I know that. It's not a belief. It's a knowing that he was reborn through me, because my life purpose, my soul's purpose, our soul's purpose is to be here, excuse me, and help heal family grief and to help parents. Because I can't say that I know what it feels like. I don't. And I hope to God I never have to experience this.
Right.
But what I know is I have had the honor of working with so many grieving parents, and they've shared their stories and they've shared different things that have worked for them and what hasn't. And I've been the scribe. I've taken all of their wisdom and put it into a book to help other people. So I'm not the expert. The experts who wrote this are all the people like the Davids of the world. And I was the scribe. I took it, and I'm here to hold space and be that container to help as you're walking through this very difficult path of child loss. So David, I love you. I love Junie. I am just so honored and so blessed to know you. And that Junie came in my life. I know that we're all connected here I'm getting tears in my eyes. I feel like Cat's right here, like, oh, this is like so cool. I love you all so much. And thank you for doing me the honor of this interview.
Oh, you're very welcome, Pat. And thank you for making it easy for me. I can't believe an hour just went by.
Isn't that cool?
I was so nervous. It was insane.
You did beautifully. So I'm going to stop the recording and hang on, David, and I'll just touch base with you right after. Hi there. Thank you for stopping by our Healing Family Grief channel, where grief can transform into peace, purpose, and even joy. That is the intention. So as host of the Healing Family Grief channel, my goal is to provide insight, inspiration, and hope for people who are grieving a deep loss, or for the people who want to provide support for those who are struggling on their grief journey. If you like what you hear, please like us, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe to our channel to hear more. Also, feel free to share any episodes that you feel could be helpful to someone you know. For more information about the Confident Grief Coach School, or to find a grief coach, or perhaps to order one of my free ebooks, please check out our website at www.healingfamilygrief.com.